Now it's going to be the last session about the satellite industry. I'm going to call now Renata Brazil. David, if you can join me here in the podium. Thank you very much for coming. So we are going to speak about the business now. Yeah? It's important. 50 years ago, it was just an active satellite, they told me that. And can we figure out, when we look back, that the business will be so important? Please. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Sit there. So, sir, please, coming. Go ahead. No. You start. Thierry Guillemin, thank you to join us. And please sit down. You're CTO of Intelsat. And Bart Palmer, you are CTO of Global East.
Globecast America.
You write very bad. Thank you very much to join us. So, was it? Can we think that the business will be so big and so important? And it's just a beginning, I can say.
I guess not. I was not born 50 years ago, so I don't know. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and I would be sharing with you a little bit about the International Telecommunications Satellite Organization, ITSO, as well as some figures on the telecommunication satellite industry that has been provided to me by the Satellite Industry Association, who could not. Okay. Hello? Yes. The topic of my presentation is the restructuring of an IGO and the telecommunication satellite industry. The International Telecommunications Satellite Organization, at the time known as Intelsat, was created by a group of nations in 1964, which aimed to establish a global and non-discriminatory communication satellite system. Next slide, please. Its mission was to ensure the availability of affordable satellite telecommunication services to all countries of the world on a non-discriminatory basis. In 2001, Intelsat went through a major restructuring. And the main outcomes of the restructuring were the transfer of all Intelsat assets to the private entity, Intelsat Ltd., the change of the acronym of the International Telecommunications Satellite Organization from Intelsat to ITSO, the approval of a public service agreement between ITSO and Intelsat, which grants ITSO a broad mandate to oversee the performance of public service obligations by Intelsat, and the approval of the ITSO agreement. ITSO is headquartered in Washington, D.C., and we currently have 150 member parties. Since the restructuring, it's our mission to ensure that Intelsat provides public telecommunication services on a global and non-discriminatory basis, and also to protect the parties' common heritage, which are the frequency assignments that were transferred to the notifying administrations, the US and the UK, at the time of the restructuring, to be used for the benefit of the ITSO parties. In this context, the main objectives of ITSO, as contained in our strategic plan, are to maintain the continuity of the provision of public telecommunication satellite services, to protect the parties' common heritage, and to contribute to the promotion of a global information and communications infrastructure. Now that I gave you a very brief outline about ITSO, I would like to spend the last few minutes of my presentation on the evolution of the telecommunication industry since the restructuring, which took place in 2001. The main change in the telecommunication industry since the restructuring is the recognized importance of the global availability of broadband services and the very important role that satellite providers have in delivering broadband. In addition, it's very important to emphasize that several countries still rely exclusively on satellite communication services for their international and national public services. And in fact, satellite and fiber technologies have each established a niche market that will remain in place for the foreseeable future. I would also like to share with you some figures that have been provided to me by the Satellite Industry Association. The global revenues from the satellite industry topped $177 billion in 2011. The industry posted an average annual growth of 10% over the last decade. Commercial communication satellites make up just under 40% of nearly 1,000 satellites currently on orbit. Over 45 countries on 4 continents have operating communication satellites. Citizens thrive on consumer satellite services. There were 150 million satellite TV subscribers worldwide in 2011, and 21 million satellite radio subscribers worldwide in 2011. Finally, satellites are relied upon for global coverage, remote access, and instant infrastructure for everyday communications. That's it from my part. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And permit me to welcome the Dr. Carrie-Ann Jones, and she will have the conclusion in some couple of minutes. And thank you to be here, and we appreciate to have you there. So, Mr. Guillemin, this is your turn to explain us what your why your industry is so booming.
Well, first of all, good afternoon, and I would like to say that I'm very relieved. I missed the video live, and it was run by our friends of Globecast. It was running over Intelsat satellites. And when I arrived here, I asked, did it work? It would have been very embarrassing, right? 50 years after Telstar. So I want to give you the perspective of the commercial operators. And as Philip said, it has been an incredible evolution since the whole space thing started. It started really as a technological race between superpowers. And it has morphed in the last 50 years into an incredibly successful industry and a business that is now serving hundreds of millions of people on a daily basis, where you go and withdraw money at the ATM, when you pay your gas at the pump, when you watch TV, whether it's coming directly to your roof or seemingly through cable, when you're in Russia or in Africa and you give a cell phone call to a friend, or you're in the US and you call a friend in Africa on his cell phone. In all of these cases, you are using satellites, and chances are you are using Intelsat satellites, but we are not the only ones. So this has become an incredible success story, and of course, with the deluge of data around the world, satellites, like the rest of the infrastructure, are becoming more and more important and more critical. The cover of the slide was not made by engineers. It's obvious, because if a satellite turns its back to the Earth like that, it does not work. I want you to be aware of that. Next slide, please. So, well, you probably want to show the entire slide at once. Okay. So I don't want to come back to the history. My predecessors on this stage have done that better, but let's start with 2 years after Telstar, the foundation of Intelsat. It was founded initially by 11 nations, and the US and France were some of them. And what Intelsat did, it took the Telstar success and took it to another altitude. And this altitude is called the geostationary orbit. So we just implemented the vision of a scientist and writer, science fiction writer, Arthur C. Clarke. And we put the satellites on a place that's the only one in the universe where you can put a spacecraft that will then seem fixed when observed from the Earth. So that's very important, of course, because if you have an antenna on your roof, you want to receive TV, you don't want this satellite to move. There is only one place that works for that. It's a circle in the plane of the equator at about 22,000 miles above the Earth, or 35,000 kilometers. It's a very precious asset for humanity. And most telecom operators like Intelsat have put their satellites on this orbit since then. 20 years, the first satellite was Early Bird that we launched, and it was supposed to last 1 year. Actually, it lasted long enough to be there for the Apollo 11 mission, and was used, one of the satellites used for the broadcast of the moon landing. About 500 million users saw that, and it was a real, first real global broadcast, TV broadcast on satellite. 20 years later, we facilitated the first intercontinental high-definition television transmission between Japan and the US at the time. 10 years later, that's not telecommunication, that's also very important for our day-to-day life today. The first high-resolution commercial imaging satellite is launched. Everybody's using Google Maps or Google Earth today, and you know how important this is. Few weeks ago, still commercial, it's still not communication, SpaceX was able to dock their Dragon capsule to the International Earth Station. The same week this happened, Intelsat announced that we were the first commercial operator to purchase a Falcon Heavy rocket from SpaceX that we will use in the coming years. And we'll talk about the future that's coming up with our fleet. Next one, please. So a lot has changed since the beginning. The Intelsat 20 satellite you see here, we will launch it on an Ariane launcher from French Guiana in a few days. It's 200 times more heavy than Early Bird. It's 1,000 times more powerful. And where Early Bird was carrying one TV channel, black and white. Actually, I saw the moon landing from the French Riviera when my parents woke me up at the time, so I can tell you it worked, but it was not a great picture. Now we can carry on Intelsat 20 more than 500 TV channels. That's standard definition. It would be a bit less in high def. And satellites last 15 years or more. Next slide, please. So this is how our fleet looks like today. We have 52 satellites in geostationary orbit. Arthur C. Clarke said 3 would be enough to see most of the world population, and he was right. The problem is that with only 3, you don't have enough throughput, and people want to use these satellites much more. So we have satellites that are covering over and over the globe in order to provide the necessary capacity. You see that we have fiber here as well. The question was asked before, how about fiber? What Intelsat has learned over the years is that satellite is excellent for certain things, and fiber is better for other things. And the best approach is to use what works best for the different parts of the network or the different parts of the application you want to cover. So we actually operate also a 58,000 kilometer network of fiber around the world that we have paired last week with the global media network of British Telecom. Next, please. So here are the services we are contributing to with our satellites. Media, that's the distribution on TV. So as I said before, even if TV seems to come from cable at your home, chances are a satellite has broadcast these programs to the cable head end, and then from the cable head end to your home, it's TV. So we're carrying worldwide a few thousand TV programs, and in high definition we're at 400 now on a worldwide basis. Government services, of course, critical end-to-end missions, secure communications, and a lot of mobile users, whether on the ground, on the sea, or in the air. And in the air, it may be manned or unmanned planes. And finally, network services. Telecommunication infrastructure is really what Intelsat started with 45 years ago. And fixed telecommunication infrastructure at the time. Now we are helping cellular networks to develop in emerging countries. We're providing, of course, VSAT networks for enterprise and a broadband everywhere in the world, whether it's fixed or mobile. Mobility is, of course, a sweet spot for satellites because it will take a few years, I guess, before you can plug a cable into a plane or a vessel or a train. Next one, please. You can show the entire slide, please. So just want to say on this one, why satellite is likely to still be relevant for a few years or a few decades to come. There are 5 essential trends that are pushing the demand for satellite services. The first one is everything is becoming global. We have a lot of media companies as customers in the US, for instance. These companies need to become global in order to grow. They need to start addressing emerging markets, and we help them become global. Connectivity and broadband, you see here an oil rig. The connectivity is everywhere, and even when you are in the middle of the ocean, you want to stay connected, and you have data to transfer, and more of these data are bandwidth hungry because it's more and more video, more and more information. Emerging economies, middle class rising in a number of emerging markets. These people who sometimes didn't even have fixed telephone lines 20 years ago want to go directly to the technologies that everybody else has. They want smartphones, they want tablets, they want everything that actually helps them grow their own businesses. And this is a driver for us. Mobility, as I said, will of course be enabled by satellite for the foreseeable future. And finally, the format proliferation. It's really about reaching anyone, anywhere, and being able to transmit, deliver to them any content. This means a number of paths that the telecom companies and the media companies are looking for, and satellites are one of these paths. I think it was said before that we are relatively small with regard to what fiber is transporting. That's true. But I think we are a complement that's extremely useful for all the reasons that I've explained here. And my last slide, please. We are trying to accompany the trend for high throughput. Everybody needs more bits, more megabits or gigabits or exabits. Our satellites need to be more capable, so we just introduced a few weeks ago our next generation that's called EPIC. These satellites will have roughly 10 times the capacity of the standard satellites that we have been building so far. And you see the coverage of the first 2 satellites here. First one is IS-29, 1 satellite for the Americas, plus the North Atlantic, because of course there are many planes flying over the North Atlantic. That's the highest density route there. And I'm sorry for people who thought plane was the last place where you were able to not to be connected. It was like an island, an oasis of freedom. It's about to be over. Second satellite is IS-33, and it will cover, this one will start a bit later this year, the construction. And as you see, it will cover pretty much the rest of the world. So we are trying to stay relevant for a long time, and we'll keep trying to make it exciting for you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thierry. I have a question for you. It was a question the journalists asked themselves during the Iraq war. We want to know, it's a journalist question, to know what is the definition of the satellite. Can you read a newspaper on the floor, and what details can you see?
Well, I don't know what the people who actually watch these details can see, because they would not tell me. You need a certain level of security clearance in order to know, right? But go on Google Maps, and you have a good notion of what you as a layman and I as a layman are able to see. Did I not answer your question?
Not completely, but it's interesting. Bart Palmer, please. CTO, Globcast. Thank you for coming here. And you agree with Thierry? We are just beginning the business, the space business.
Oh yeah, yes. The next 50 years have a lot of promise ahead of us. So the first 50 years have certainly been interesting, but the next 50 years hold much, much promise. I think is this one working? Is this working? Yeah, that's okay. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here today on behalf of Globecast and to represent my colleagues in Paris and all around the world. We are the ones who, in concert with our fine friends at Intelsat today, delivered today's events via satellite, just as our predecessor of our parent company, France Telecom-Orange, did with Bell Labs and the other partners on the Telstar project on this day back in 1962. At that time, researchers at the French National Post, Telegraph, and Telecom Office, which would later become France Telecom, were involved with Bell Labs and the partners in a budding technology that had great unexplored potential. That project was delivery of video by satellite communications. By the 1990s, the boom in the satellite industry meant that France Telecom's satellite arm would spin off to become Globecast, the world's leading content management and delivery company. With our roots in Europe, offices around the world became and emerged. We grew, we acquired additional capacity, and became a global force in the industry. Since our creation, the hunger for information and for audiovisual content has grown, and so has the need to manage and deliver that content. In all our years of operation, we have not seen a decline in the number of channels of television that have been created every year. I recently joined Globecast from a company based here in Silver Spring, Maryland. That company has 142 channels on the air worldwide. So the possibilities and potential for the television niching and going into different markets with regionalization and language customization and all of these other efforts are very, very much possible. When I first started in the cable industry, I started with a sports cable programmer back in 1983. We were the first true regional sports channel that was launched in the United States. We were available on one of two satellites at the time. One satellite had 24 channels. The other satellite had 12 channels. We were accompanied by early programming giants like CNN, C-SPAN, ESPN, HBO, MTV, and a few others. The cable programmer that I was with sold the operations to a sports team organization based in Houston, Texas. And at the time, they remarked that no one will pay to watch pay sports. I think we all know that one went a different direction. Next, from that satellite arm of France Telecom that saw so much potential and vision for technology, we're happy to say today that we have met the potential and have gone far beyond it. The diagrams up above show the satellite platforms that we exist on across the globe, and if you would merge all of these together, and I wish I had a drawing that would reflect that, we populate most of the world's inhabited space. And with our friends at Intelsat, Eutelsat, SES, and other satellite providers, we're able to provide this coverage and content delivery for our clients. The 500-channel world that was touted in the 90s has really become a reality. When Globecast began, we were reselling whole analog transponders. Nowadays, we're getting well over 10 standard definition channels on a transponder, 4 to 5 high-definition channels on a transponder. This has all been possible because of advances in algorithms with encoding and multiplexing and modulation systems. So we are all reaping the benefits of this expanded capacity to the consumer. We as a company currently have capacity on 28 satellites orbiting the Earth right now, beaming images to billions of homes in all formats and definitions. As related in the satellite footprint images here, you can see we do cover the majority of the Earth. Next. Other evolutions have taken place. For example, satellite, as Theory said, is no longer the only medium used to deliver content across the oceans. We've grown from becoming a satellite services company to offering hybrid services using both satellite and fiber. Right now, currently today, we have about 60,000 miles of fiber optic cable that crisscrosses the Earth over these paths. That content provides point-to-point communication. Here again, satellite is a great point-to-multipoint communication mechanism and vehicle for bringing content across the globe, but we are seeing an increasing viability in fiber optics as well. Globecast operates 10 teleports worldwide to deliver this content. We have 20 offices across the globe. And we've got 95 points of fiber presence across the world. Last but not least, who would have imagined 50 years ago that each of us here today would have a device in our pockets? And I know we've all got the iPads, you know, iPhones, Crackberries, Blackberries, Grapeberries, Blueberries, whatever you want to call them. But these devices are capable of delivering voice, data, and video instantly to the other side of the planet. Who would have predicted that despite that access, there would still be a growing demand for content worldwide? Programmers that we work with are faced with the daunting challenge of repurposing their content. And what we're seeing today is we're seeing a high propensity and a high population and delivery of content to outside outlets such as Netflix, Hulu, VOD, streaming services, catch-up TV, over-the-top TV, and other hybrid services that are currently being used to deliver that repurposed content to consumers. Power consumption at our teleports is now being dwarfed by the amount of power that we're seeing that is being consumed from transcoding farms. That is the primary mechanism and vehicle that's used to transform or conform the primary content into these other streams of content. So we're seeing a lot of different unique challenges as we grow as a company with all of this proliferation of content across the globe. Quality has evolved, technology has evolved, and access has evolved. We're living in a very awesome time. It's a really different world from when I was a kid and I was watching the images back in 1962. I was 7 then. To see where we've come, to see what the future holds for us is just absolutely phenomenal. But the human race, people across the globe, are hungry for content. They like seeing what we produce in the U.S. They like the American experience. They like seeing how the Western side of the world lives. And that's true by all of this proliferation of all of these television channels. Even further from that, the social media roadmap and where that whole industry has gone. I mean, some of these outlets such as Facebook and others, 750 million plus users. It's phenomenal how many people are connected to these types of devices. Stay connected, and as television grows, television will have more and more of a presence on those various social media outlets. So with that, finally, Globecast again is pleased to be here today to salute the pioneers, and I do call these people pioneers because what they did back in the early 60s, figuring out how to launch these satellites, put signals up, maintain all this stuff was just next to phenomenal. But they do deserve to be saluted because they had the vision, they made the original event possible, and we celebrate how far we've all come, and we thank the entire industry for helping us push technology to the next limits of the new heights of where our industry is headed. Thank you, and I hope you're excited as much about the future of telecommunications and the satellite industry as we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bart. 50 years ago, Telstar 1 was a revolution. Mm-hmm. What is a revolution today? Is it something, one object, one theory, one cable, one,
I don't think there's one specific thing that's a revolution. I think it's the merging and combining of all of this new media and next generation application. That's where we're going to see all of this take place. Here again, the question that you asked of Theory a little bit ago about images from satellite, the Big Brother approach, being able to look down from satellite, see things. Certainly in the case of Osama bin Laden and how he was tracked and caught, that was all possible from the use of drones, feeding satellite imagery across to surveillance units based in the United States and across the world. So I think, here again, the possibility of what we're just starting to see, what we can take benefit of from as consumers, from a governmental type of, position, it's all going to be very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's time now for conclusion. I called Dr. Carrie-Anne Jones. And doctor, I had a problem with you because I want to look smart. So I said, give me a bio of the Dr. Jones. And I receive so many pages, so it's difficult for me to make a choice. Can you come with me on the podium?
Thank you.
So I choose to present you like Dr. Carrie-Anne Jones, Assistant Secretary of State for Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs.
Right.
Is that enough?
That's
because
plenty.
I've plenty of more.
That's plenty.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the conclusion. And we have, of course, the video.
Right. That's what I thought. The video
Yeah.
first.
Suddenly, far-off places are no longer just names in a travel book. Big Ben in London, the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, the Colosseum in Rome. Scientists from 13 countries working together on atomic research in Switzerland. And since communication is a two-way business, into the homes of Europe, the communications satellite brought a nation sport. The baseball game caused some headaches for the translators, who explained the proceedings in 6 European languages. A nation sport and a nation's president, answering the questions of a free press at his regular news conference. History in the making and the historic past. And newspapers around the world hail the achievement. The promise of tomorrow is a reality of today. My picture on this monitor is a symbol of a dream which the scientists have enabled us to glimpse. All that remains to fulfill that dream is the will for world brotherhood in the minds and hearts of men.
It's a pleasure to have you on the podium.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the short introduction. And I think what I said to my new colleagues over here is, if you have a long resume, it means that you remember seeing some of these telecasts, and I remember them. It's a very big pleasure to be here this afternoon. And I'd like to thank the Smithsonian Institution and the National Air and Space Museum for hosting this event, along, of course, with my friends from the Embassy of France and the Site des Telecommunications. Today is a very much well-deserved commemoration and celebration of the Telstar's 50th anniversary. And as we are coming now to the close of this symposium, I'd like to focus a little bit on where we are today and what Telstar has taught us. It's built a lot of industries and it's taught us a lot of science, but I think there are other lessons we need to pay a little attention to. We live today in a global community, more than we ever have before, and we function in a global research community where new technologies are emerging at a very rapid pace. What Telstar has taught us, the first lesson I'd like to call out, is that forward-looking science is critical. The Telstar satellite shows us why this is true. Much of the technology that went into building the satellite didn't necessarily have practical application when it was first developed, but it was essential to the success of the satellite. The electronics were enabled by the then recently discovered transistor, and it had advanced solar cells for power. The maser, a forerunner to the modern laser, used in the ground stations in Maine and in France. There's a recent book out by John Gertner about Bell Laboratories that states that Telstar incorporated the synchronous use of 16 inventions patented by Bell Labs over many years. Investments in basic science are essential to our future advances. We don't always know where research will take us, what technologies we come up with today, what they'll be used for tomorrow. If you look at space technologies, they have given us body imaging scans, memory foam, and satellite TV. And technologies like these, they entertain us, they save lives, and they create jobs. Supporting research and development and enabling technology development have been part of the U.S. history from its early days. Our National Academy of Sciences was established by President Lincoln in 1863. Today, President Obama and Secretary Clinton are both champions of science, technology, and innovation, recognizing the critical role that science and technology plays in supporting economic growth, but also in addressing very challenging global issues that we face together across the world. President Obama has stated that we will, quote, harness the power of science to achieve our goals, to preserve our environment and protect our national security, to create the jobs of the future, and to live longer, healthier lives. Even in difficult budget times, the President's budgets have called for strong, sustained federal investments in research and development. The second lesson that Telstar has taught us is that the space sector is an engine of economic growth. And I came in towards the end of this panel, and I think the speakers have more than proven that point. The industry, the Space Foundation, estimates that their total for global space economy in 2011 was $290 billion in government budgets and in commercial revenue. The Satellite Industry Association estimates that total satellite industry revenue was $177 billion in 2011. Revenue from commercial satellites comes mostly from services satellites provide, such as communications. 80% of service revenues came from satellite TV. And we also know that there are many other spin-off technologies and evolving technologies. GPS is an excellent example as it is continually evolving and continually new applications are being found for it. There are other areas as well. In the 1960s, Space Labs Medical Incorporated and NASA figured out how to remotely monitor the health of astronauts. In 1968, Space Labs Medical made that technical transition to Earth. And today we are all well aware of the significant role such monitors play in our hospitals every day. The third lesson we learned from Telstar is that private sector partnerships and investment are essential. The US government and the government of France have a long history of such partnerships with companies and universities in developing and commercializing new technologies. The governments of the United States, France, and the United Kingdom partnered with private industry to develop Telstar. Bell Labs designed and constructed the experimental satellite and paid NASA to launch it. Launched from Cape Canaveral on July 10, 1962, Telstar was the first privately sponsored space launch. It sent a number of important firsts, including being the first satellite to relay television, telephone, and high-speed data. It was the first active communications satellite. Today, as you have heard from earlier speakers, private corporations are going into space and preparing to take the public with them. NASA's Commercial Orbital Transportation Services Development Program is funding SpaceX and Orbital Sciences Corporation. 2 months ago, SpaceX successfully completed its mission to the space station and brought its Dragon capsule to Earth. Orbital Space is scheduled to launch its mission to rendezvous with the space station in October. And now, the world's first commercial space line, Virgin Galactic, is calling us to, quote, book our place in space on their suborbital space vehicle. They are on track for the first powered flight by the end of the year, where they will fire up the space plane's engines. Their test will eventually, hopefully, lead to revenue-producing flights, taking passengers to the edge of space. The final lesson that I want to mention today is that international cooperation is essential. I think you can tell from the history that you've been hearing that this was, from the beginning, an international effort. The US is a strong supporter of international cooperation in outer space activities and in communication activities. At the State Department, we recognize the importance of international science and technology cooperation. We support and promote international cooperation because of the role it plays in building partnerships, addressing very tough shared problems. It also stimulates economic growth, and we know how important it is in informing policy decisions. In March 1961, the US signed agreements with the United Kingdom and France to collaborate on experimental communication satellites that will be launched by the US, starting with Telstar 1. Today, the United States has many bilateral and multilateral agreements on space, science, and technology. Through our science and technology agreements, we work with other nations on areas of mutual importance. The United States and France have a robust collaborative research partnership through our bilateral agreement that we signed in 2008. We cooperate in health, biotechnology, energy, space, nanotechnology, archaeology, agriculture, and climate change. And in many of those areas, space comes into play in terms of remote sensing and sharing data. NASA has many agreements active at this time, over 500 with many countries. Some of them you are probably very familiar with. The International Space Station is the one that comes to mind, but there are others. There is the International Living with a Star program, which coordinates research missions to better understand the sun and how it affects our technology on here, technology we've become very dependent on. There is also the A-Train, which is a convoy of 6 satellites. This shows the value of cooperating with other countries. This effort generates synergies far beyond what they would accomplish alone, increasing our understanding of water and energy cycles and factors that influence air quality and also agricultural efficiency. The A-Train is an international effort. 2 of the satellites were built and launched by France and Japan. A number of the instruments aboard the others were provided by France and Canada. Today, we are communicating across the globe, and we are seeing advances in our understanding of Earth that we could not have imagined 50 years ago. Today, there are over 900 active satellites in orbit, with approximately 580 providing communication services, almost 150 used for Earth observation. Today, we need to work on the amount of data that we are getting. We are immersed in data. We face challenges of compatibility and interoperability. We are working internationally to build partnerships, such as the International Group on Earth Observations. This international effort is a partnership of 88 countries and the European Commission and nearly 64 international organizations, Started in 2003, this group seeks to establish the Global Earth Observation System of Systems. This will be an integrated effort where data will come from thousands of individual land, sea, air, and space-based observed observations. This is an international effort that has to take data that is enormous in its quantity and integrate it to try to tell us how we are affecting the Earth and how we can better plan together. Beyond the challenge of data, we are also facing the challenge of making sure that we are training the next generation of scientists and engineers who will create the inventions that we cannot even imagine as we sit here today. The Obama administration has been committed and will continue to be committed to strengthening our national investments in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. I am very optimistic about our future scientists and explorers, as space has always fascinated the young. That fascination brought us to the launch of Telstar 50 years ago, and it brought us to where we are today. If we continue to follow the lessons that Telstar has taught us, we will certainly be able to improve the lives of many and learn more and more about the world and the universe around us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jones.
Certainly.
Can I give you this?
Certainly.
To remember this anniversary.
Oh.
This is a commemoration medal from the French embassy, and the other one is from IEEE.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, and thank you again. So now we are ready, not me, but they are ready to answer your question. So if you have any question, please go to the podium there.
Thank you very much, everyone. The presentations really highlighted the development of a kind of international community via technology, the easy transmission of all kinds of messages and information across national borders. I wonder if you might, any of you might respond to this. What you see is the dynamic between that condition that we're in with the ease of communication afforded by these technologies and individual countries' interest in protecting national identities.
Wants to answer? Dr. John?
We'll start with an easy question, huh? I think what you point out is a question that looks to the balance that is always there between competition and collaboration. I think space has developed in such a way that collaboration has been the sort of primary force because of the nature of the undertaking. It's so complex, it's so highly technical, and it impacts all of us. So I think that there's always a balancing act, and I think that through international negotiations and the development of agreements, these issues are addressed, and sometimes negotiations are, depending on the issue, the country, and the times we may find ourselves in. Sometimes those negotiations are more difficult than others. But my experience has been that we have built a collection of negotiations and precedents that have really been important for space, recognizing it as an area where the way everyone wants to behave is through international cooperation.
Thierry.
I'm only an engineer. I just want to say, when you work in the space industry, you know that not much can be accomplished without cooperation and without help. I would like to say also that as an individual, I cannot live alone. I need others. Does not mean that I give up my integrity, right? It's you have to work both at the same time.
One thing that we see in the broadcast industry is collaboration with trade organizations, IEEE, National Association of Broadcasters, Society of Motion Picture Television Engineers, Society of Broadcast Engineers, National Cable Television Association. These organizations now exist globally and collaborate amongst nations with people in similar industries to help drive the technology and bring things to market Communication is instantaneous these days, so it provides the right feeding ground and breeding ground for getting a lot of these solutions to market as soon as possible.
Renata?
No, that's fine.
Not for you. Okay, other questions?
Yeah, I may have a question. When Telstar was launched, I read that some journalists joked about the first call between Vice President Johnson and David Capel, AT&T, and they called that the $50 million telephone call. But as Renata showed in her presentation, now it ended up in maybe 250,000 jobs here in the U.S. Relying on satellites or directly linked to the satellites. Now, do you think, maybe Dr. Johnson, but on the panel, do you think that the same ratio can be achieved now when a satellite costs rather $1 billion than $50 million?
I think from a jobs perspective, it's only going to continue to grow. Certainly as broadcasters continue to proliferate their content, there's got to be people that manage these systems, manage the workflows, design the workflows, manage assets. It all comes down to numbers, and yeah, it's going to continue to grow and grow and grow. We've seen explosions of video growth in India and those types of countries. You know, Southeast Asia is just a burgeoning environment. South America right now is on the verge of huge expansion with high definition. There's little high definition in South America right now and in Latin America. So that in itself is going to drive additional opportunity for jobs and the like.
I would add that I agree. I mean, I think one of the things that's amazing about the technology is that the applications that have grown out of it, no one anticipated. And I think as the technology develops and more markets and economies are interested, I think it's just going to necessarily be a growth industry. And I don't think it's necessarily easy to predict because it's based so much on the technological advancements.
Thank you. You have some more questions? Go ahead.
Okay,
Old are you? The space is for young people, they said.
This is kind of a three-part question, but it's all related. Number one, with the limited size that we have in space, especially the geosynchronous orbit, as space access starts to become more accessible to civilians and private corporations, how do we determine who gets access to that orbit and who doesn't? And the second part of the question is, how do we handle a satellite that becomes defective and can no longer be ejected into a graveyard orbit? And the third final part of the question is, how do we deal with space junk from satellites being destroyed, either intentionally or accidentally?
Well, I can answer the first part for telecommunications. Actually, the geostationary orbit is it's only one circle, but it's a very large circle. The circumference of that circle is 240,000 kilometers. So even with a few hundred satellites over there, there is a lot of space in between. Actually, it's more the interference between those satellites, the management of the frequencies, that's important, and this is very well regulated by an international body that's called the International Telecommunication Union, in which countries are represented, national administrations that will ask for rights for orbital slots, for frequencies. And then we'll let representatives, industries in their country use them. So that's a very well regulated system. When it comes to what does it take to put a satellite to graveyard orbit? That's your question.
Well, my question is, if a satellite becomes defective,
yeah,
and it can no longer be ejected into a graveyard orbit, so it's still stuck in geosynchronous orbit, but it can't be removed.
So indeed, most of the satellites are deorbited healthy, of course. So they are moved 200-300 kilometers above geo orbit. Some of them have an orbit life that's interrupted by an anomaly, most of these anomalies do not prevent from using the propulsion system and push the satellite up. It has happened in the past that a few satellites have stayed stuck in geostationary orbit. Now, when a spacecraft is there, left to its own device, it does not stay on this nice circle. There is the attraction of the moon. There is the pressure from the sun, radiation of the sun on the solar rays of the spacecraft, whether it's working or not. So progressively, the orbit changes shape, actually. And after some time, the satellite is, in fact, not on geostationary orbit anymore. The last thing is we make sure we know what's out there, whether the satellites are operating or not. We work with the US Air Force, very close with them. And we just created Intelsat together with Inmarsat and SES, created a couple of years ago the Satellite Data Association, where we progressively welcome all the operators around the world, using not only the geo-orbit, but also low Earth orbit, to share all the data concerning our satellites, where they are, the frequencies they are using, the coverage they are using. That's not only to avoid collisions, that's also to manage better this interference problem I was talking about before from a frequency standpoint. So all this is, I think it's a community that's organizing itself very well. And there is also international regulation that helps us there.
Another question?
No, I was good, thanks.
Go ahead.
I don't know whether I should ask this or not, but since there's a State Department person here, ITAR. ITAR puts communication satellites on the munitions list, and it's a very has been making it very difficult to have international cooperation on a technical level between, say, students from one country to another working on small satellites and things of the sort. What's the future unless ITAR is removed on the restriction?
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to, for those in the audience, is the issue of the technology that is on certain potential satellites that could be considered necessary for export control, related to certain countries where the U.S. may have concerns in terms of what kind of technology is exported. I think, again, that's really a balancing act, and we will continue to look at that, and we continue to work on it to make sure that it is up to date with the technology in terms of what needs to be controlled and regulated and what is fine. It is a sensitive area, and I think it is something that we pay attention to very seriously, and we work with the scientific and technical community to make sure that whatever we're looking at is appropriate for regulation, and that it's not a hindrance to ongoing research with a particular country.
Thank you. Now it's time to say thank you, Dr. John. Thank you for coming. And thank you for answering the questions. And we hope to see you for the next anniversary. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Thierry. Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for the public to be here and to stay almost 3 hours. So it's interesting to know that people are fascinating enough to stay 3 hours in a room like this. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to the people who help us to make this this show alive, and thank you for for this anniversary, and thank you for the knowledge you give us. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening and safe trip.